Hello, I'm Tiffany, creator of Red Petal Patterns, and this is Knitting Basics for Beginners. On the last episode, I had started with increases and then got carried away with showing bobbles and got really excited about that and ran out of time. So in order to keep these short, I decided to go ahead and split the other type of increase I wanted to show you into another video. The last increase I showed you was knit front back, or alternatively knit back front, and those are both the same thing. There's no difference between them. It's just how you normally knit. If you normally knit in the back, then you would start knit back front. If you normally knit in the front, you would start knit front back. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go back and watch all about twisted stitches, and that will thoroughly explain front and back. What we're going to talk about today is the increase known as make one, and this is normally written as M1L, M1R, and that's make one left, make one right. It can also be written as make one loop, knit loop left, knit loop right. I don't remember how it's written, but it's another variation of make one. This is much more invisible than the knit front back method. It can be a little trickier, and you can't really do them on top of each other every row because it requires you to go down a row in order to do them. One of them requires you to go down a row. The other one requires you to use the one in between. I don't think it's any more invisible than the knit front back. Either way, you're creating an extra stitch where there wasn't one before. But I don't know that it's a little bit more invisible than the one that I showed you previously. So you can see the edges on this are just a tad cleaner than they are on the knit front back piece. The knit front back piece, you can see just little tick marks across there and little tick marks in here. And this one it's make one, but it's making one in the loop instead of making one in the bar. And you can see that that's pretty darn invisible. That's really smooth. You still get the direction on either side, but you don't get the little tick marks. That's what I've been calling them, like ticking. You don't get these little hatch marks in the sides like you do when you do the front back. So I'm going to show you these two and the way they worked. So on the edge, and again, I'm going to emphasize, if your edge is going to be sewn, it will not matter. Just make sure that you always go in one stitch so that you have that one stitch of selvage to sew. But how neat that is really not that will happen with practice. The more you work, the neater those edges will get. And I wouldn't stress about it too much right now. On the other hand, if this is going to be seen, you need to make sure that you're using good practices and that you're doing either the slip at the beginning of the stitch and knit at the end of the stitch, or purl, however you're working them, but that you slip at the beginning of every stitch, or that you do whatever design element is in your pattern that you're working. So I'm going to start with showing you how to do one on the edge. And you've got your stitch, and now you're going to work one stitch, and then you're going to make a stitch. And you can do this one of two ways. When you pull your stitches apart, there's a little bar there between your stitches. Right there. You can pull the bar up onto your needle, and then you're going to work. So this one has the front stitch going first. You want to intentionally twist this stitch. So you're not going to go in and do this, because that will leave that hole. That hole would be permanent. You want to go in the wrong way and make sure that that stitch is twisted. So when you make that stitch is closed at the bottom. So let me show you what that looks like again. So if you go in and pick up this way, that front leg is going first and the back leg is going second. You want to ignore that and go in to that back leg and make your stitch, so that right there at the bottom you see I twisted it. And now I've just made a stitch. Now the problem with this one is that it not only leaves the little bar that you get, the little purl bump that you get with the other method that I showed you with the knit front back, but you also get a little space underneath it. So I do not find the make one to be invisible. I actually don't prefer this method at all. There is another way to make one that does not do the front back thing, and it is actually quite invisible, and that's the one I'm going to show you right now. So you can use it in the place of M1R and M1L to make one, but you will not be able to use this if you're doing them on top of each other. You need some space between, because you have to go 2 rows down. And that would be that I'm going to make my stitch, and then I'm going to go, not the stitch I just made, I'm going to go in the next stitch below it. So this is be easier if my camera would focus. Hopefully you can see this. So this is the stitch I just made. That's the loop from the stitch I just made. You don't want that one. You want the next one down. Which would have been the purl from the row before. So you go the next row down. You do not have to twist this. You can leave it just the way it is. Right now, it's the back leg first. So I'm going to go in and knit that in the back leg. And that will be a perfectly invisible. Once I knit that, that will be almost invisible. There's no little bumps or anything involved in that. So I'm going to show you again. That is to make one that leans to the right. Yes. Wherever you add your stitch, so if you add if you have the here and then you do your increase on this side, it will push it this way. If you have your stitch here and you make your increase, then make your stitch, it will push it this way. That added stitch will push your other stitches from wherever. So that's how you can balance if they are going this way or this way, your columns, the way they line up from the center. And that's what's happened here, how you have the straight part and you have these that lean to the right and these that lean to the left. That is how you achieve them. So if you do your stitch, then your increase, which this is the stitch I just made. I don't want to use that one. I want to go down one and pull up that loop and knit into it. And that I've just made another invisible increase leaning right. A left leaning would be a little different. So because I didn't make the stitch, I'm not going to go down to the second stitch after the one on the needle. So on the needle will be the first stitch. The next leg is the second one. The next leg is the third one. If I had just made a stitch like I did on this side, I don't want the stitch I just made. I want the third loop down. If you want it to lean left, you didn't make a stitch. So that is the same third one. That's from the same row as the right leaning one. If I went down to this one, I would end up having a tuck because I still have to make a stitch here. So I'm going to take the second one, put it on my needle, and this one is the front leg first. So I'm going to knit it, and then I'm going to knit this one the direction it wants to go. And I just made a left leaning make one. This method is nearly invisible. So let me get to the other side of this marker and show you one more time. I just made a stitch. Now I'm going to go down to the third loop. So 1, 2, 3. So not the stitch I just made, the one below it. And knit that one normal. And then for the next one, that's a right leaning. Now for a left leaning, you go to the second one, not the third one. Go to the second one, put it on the needle, knit it like normal, knit it like normal, and you've got yourself an invisible increase. So that is the difference between the knit front back or knit back front and the make one. And you can use either one of those. You don't have to master the make one right off the bat. But if you want your increases to be invisible while still creating that directional lean, then you would use the make one. There are other increases. There's other ways to do increases. Again, these were the two easiest ones. The only reason that I generally fall back to the knit front back is because that is the first one I learned, and it served me well for many years. And it's also the one that creates bobbles, and just how fun are bobbles. But this one is really, really nice if you want to hide those shapings. So if you needed to make breast darts, if you needed to make waist darts, if you needed to make any kind of shaping in the body of your sweater that is not a design element, the make one is excellent. And I know it's not called make one, but this is what I do. It's called something with the loops. This is the technique that I use whenever it calls for make one instead of the knit front back. And I hope you have fun practicing with that. I will see you next time. Bye.